Her father was the British colonel who destroyed the sacred Hadza hunting grounds and massacred their people. But when she, lost and dying in the wilderness, fell at the feet of the last surviving Hadza prince, he had to choose between the vengeance he had sworn or the redemption his soul needed. No one imagined that the daughter of the killer would become the savior of a forgotten tribe, and that the warrior who swore never to love a white woman would find in her the purest love that had ever existed.
In the gilded halls of the British colonial residence in Dar es Salaam, where crystal chandeliers imported from London reflected the arrogance of an empire that believed itself invincible, lived Victoria Ashford, a young woman of 24 whose name carried the weight of blood stained by conquest. Her auburn hair fell in soft waves to her waist, and her green eyes held a sadness that no amount of luxury could erase. It was the year 1894, 10 years after her father, Colonel Edmund Ashford, had participated in the brutal suppression of the Hadza resistance near Lake Eyasi. The stories of his military valor filled the drawing rooms of colonial society, but Victoria knew another truth. She had grown up hearing her father speak in his sleep, shouting names in Hadzane while reliving the massacre he had ordered at the sacred baobab grove. Victoria. Her father's voice resonated in the main dining room that October morning. I have arranged your marriage to Lord Frederick Pemberton. He is a man of 56 years, widowed, but with vast plantations in Kenya. The wedding will be in 2 weeks. The words fell upon her like stones. Lord Pemberton was known for his cruelty towards the African laborers who worked on his estates, and rumors said that his 3 previous wives had died under mysterious circumstances. Victoria felt the palace walls closing around her like a golden prison. Father, she murmured with a trembling voice, please, do not force me into this. Lord Pemberton is a cruel man. Everyone knows it. Colonel Edmund Ashford struck the table with his fist, making the silver dinnerware tremble. Silence. I have not raised you to question my decisions. This marriage will consolidate our position in British East Africa. Your opinion does not matter. That night, while stars shone over the city that had once been a free port, Victoria made the most important decision of her life. She packed a small knapsack with bread, water, and her deceased mother's locket. She waited until the residence was submerged in the silence of dawn and escaped through the servant's door, venturing into the darkness toward an unknown destiny. She had no plan whatsoever, only knowing that she preferred to die free in the wilderness than live as a prisoner in a marriage that would destroy her soul. She walked toward the west, guided by the stars her mother had taught her to read when she was a child. But Victoria, raised in the luxuries of colonial society, was not prepared for the hostility of the wild nature that existed beyond the city walls. In the sacred lands that the British had not managed to conquer completely, where the ancient Hadza spirits still whispered among the morning mists, lived Gudo, the last legitimate prince of the Hadza lineage. At 30 years old, his name meant the one who protects, and his presence radiated the fierce dignity of a heritage that refused to be extinguished. His dark skin showed the scars of countless battles against the colonial invaders. His close-cropped hair was adorned with beads made from ostrich eggshells that proclaimed his royal status. His dark eyes held the pain of having witnessed the destruction of his people's way of life when he was barely a boy of 14 years. Gudo had been present that cursed day in 1884 when his father, Chief Mambali, was executed during the massacre at the sacred baobab grove. He had heard the screams, had seen the blood run across the ancestral hunting grounds, had smelled the smoke of burning settlements. And among all the British faces that plagued his nightmares, one stood out with brutal clarity: Colonel Edmund Ashford, the man who had given the direct order to execute his father. For 10 years, Gudo had lived hidden in the wilderness, gathering the survivors of his people and preserving the ancestral traditions that the British tried to erase. He had sworn before the ancestral spirits that someday he would avenge his father and restore the honor of his people. But the hatred that fed his heart also consumed him, making him increasingly solitary, increasingly bitter. That morning he was hunting kudu in the bush when he heard a sound that should not be there, a female voice murmuring in English, weak and desperate. His warrior instincts activated immediately. The British rarely ventured so deep into the territory his people still controlled. It could be a trap, an ambush in disguise. He approached stealthily, moving through the acacia trees with the silent grace of a leopard. What he found left him completely bewildered. At the foot of a sacred baobab tree, semi-conscious and trembling with fever, lay a young British woman dressed in noble clothes, now torn and dirty. Her skin was pale from illness, her lips cracked from dehydration, and on her ankle he could clearly see the swelling of a puff adder bite. Gudo's first instinct was to walk away. She was British, enemy by birth. Letting her die would be a small act of justice for everything his people had suffered. But when the young woman opened her eyes, looking at him with a mixture of fear and silent supplication, something inside him broke. He had expected to see the typical arrogance of the British, the contempt with which his people treated the Africans. But in those green eyes he saw only pain, vulnerability, and an undeniable humanity that forced him to recognize something he had tried to deny for years. Not all enemies are monsters. "Please," murmured Victoria in English, barely conscious. "Help me. I don't want to die alone." Gudo closed his eyes, fighting an internal battle that threatened to tear him apart. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to walk away, to let nature claim another British victim. But his training as a leader, as a protector of his people, had taught him that a true chief protects the defenseless, no matter who they are. With a deep sigh that carried the weight of centuries of pain, he knelt beside her. "I am not going to hurt you," he told her in fluent English, learned during his years observing the colonizers, "but I need to treat that bite, or you will die before dawn." Victoria looked at him with eyes glassy from fever. For a moment, her feverish mind transformed the beads in his hair into angel wings, and she believed she had died and a celestial being had come for her. "Are you real?" she murmured before losing consciousness completely. Gudo carried her in his arms, surprised by how light she was. He took her quickly through the bush toward his hidden refuge, a sacred cave that had served as a ceremonial site before the colonization. Each step he took felt like a betrayal to his father's memory, but something stronger than hatred propelled him forward. In the cave, he worked with the efficiency of someone trained in the art of Hadza herbal medicine. He extracted the venom from the wound, applied poultices of sacred herbs, and gave her infusions of acacia bark and wild honey. For 3 days and 3 nights, he watched over her sleep, feeding her with nutritious broths when she regained moments of consciousness, cleaning the sweat from her forehead during fevers. And during those 3 days, something changed in the heart of the Hadza prince. Watching her fight against death, hearing her murmur in dreams about escaping a forced marriage, seeing the tears that rolled down her cheeks when she relived painful memories, Gudo began to see beyond the label of British enemy. He saw a woman who, like him, was trapped by the cruel decisions of others. A woman who had chosen to risk her life rather than submit to an existence without dignity. In a twisted way, they were kindred spirits, both prisoners of a world they had not chosen, both fighting for freedom in a time when freedom was the scarcest luxury. When Victoria finally awakened completely, the afternoon sun filtered through the cave entrance, creating golden patterns on the stone walls decorated with ancient Hadza paintings. For a moment, she did not remember where she was or how she had arrived there. Then memory returned in waves, the flight, the wilderness, the burning pain in her ankle, and those dark eyes looking at her with an intensity that had penetrated to her soul. She sat up slowly, feeling weakness throughout her body, but also noticing that the pain from the bite had diminished considerably. Her ankle was carefully bandaged with clean cloths and ointments that gave off an herbal aroma she did not recognize. Someone had cared for her with expert dedication. "Do not move too quickly," said a deep voice from the cave entrance. Victoria turned her head and saw Gudo entering with a clay bowl full of steaming liquid. In daylight, she could see him clearly for the first time, tall, strong, with features that seemed carved in ebony by the ancient spirits. The ostrich eggshell beads in his hair gleamed white against his dark skin, and around his neck he wore a necklace of animal teeth that indicated nobility. "You saved me," murmured Victoria, her voice still weak. "Why? I am British. You must hate me." Gudo approached and offered her the bowl. "It is broth with healing herbs. You need to regain strength." He waited until she took the bowl before responding to her question. "I do not know you well enough to hate you. I hate what your people have done to mine, but you are just a woman who was dying. My honor did not allow me to abandon you." Victoria drank the broth slowly, feeling how the warmth spread through her weakened body. "You speak English perfectly. How?" "I learned by observing and listening to your compatriots," responded Gudo with a tone that mixed bitterness with pragmatism. "Know your enemy," the wise men say. I have spent years studying their customs, their language, their weaknesses. "And what are our weaknesses?" asked Victoria, surprising herself with her own bravery in asking that question. Gudo studied her with penetrating eyes. "Arrogance, greed, the inability to see humanity in those you consider inferior." He paused. "But you seem different. Why were you alone in the wilderness?" Victoria lowered her gaze to the empty bowl, feeling tears threatening to spill. "I was fleeing from a forced marriage. My father sold me to a cruel old man who has buried 3 wives. I preferred to die free than live as his prisoner." The words resonated in Gudo's heart with painful familiarity. He knew too well what it meant to be treated as property, as an object without voice or will. For years after the colonization, the British had enslaved his people, taking not only their lands but their very dignity. "I understand that choice," he said finally, his voice softening for the first time. "Freedom is the most sacred gift. Many of my people prefer to die rather than live in chains." Victoria lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes. For the first time, she truly looked at him, not as a threat or a savage as she had been taught, but as a man with depth, pain, and honor. "Who are you? How do you know medicine?" Gudo hesitated. Every instinct told him not to reveal his true identity, to maintain distance. But there was something about this woman, about her honest vulnerability and her courage in choosing freedom over security, that made him want to be equally honest. "My name is Gudo. It means the one who protects in Hadza. I was trained from childhood in the arts of war, medicine, and leadership. My people consider me their chief, their leader." He stopped, carefully measuring his next words. "And you, brave British woman who prefers death to submission, what is your name?" "Victoria," she responded simply. For some reason, she did not want to give her surname. The name Ashford carried too much weight, too much blood. Just Victoria. During the following days, as Victoria recovered her strength, a strange but surprisingly comfortable routine was established between them. Gudo left early to hunt and gather, returning with food and medicinal herbs. Victoria, still unable to walk much due to her ankle, spent her days exploring the cave and the wonders it contained. The walls were covered with Hadza paintings that told stories of hunts and ceremonies. There was a small altar where Gudo maintained offerings of wild honey and flowers. Victoria found carefully preserved artifacts, tools of stone and wood that spoke of a culture far older than her own. It was like discovering an entire world that she had been taught to despise, but which now filled her with wonder. "This is beautiful," She murmured one afternoon while studying a painting that showed hunters with bows pursuing giraffes. At the residence, they taught us that you were savages without culture. Gudo, who was preparing dinner, tensed visibly. History is written by the vectors. They erase what does not suit them to remember. He approached and pointed to the images. The Hadza have lived on this land for thousands of years, longer than any empire. Our hunters know every animal, every plant, every water source. We take only what we need and leave the rest for future generations. Victoria listened in silence while Gudo, with a voice charged with contained emotion, described the magnificence of the way of life that had been lost. He spoke of the ceremonies where the entire tribe gathered under the stars, of the hunts where skill and respect for animals were more important than the kill, of the songs that had been passed down for countless generations. What happened? Asked Victoria softly, though she knew the answer. She wanted to hear it from the other side of history. Gudo's expression darkened. The British came with their guns and their land claims. My grandfather welcomed them, offered to share hunting grounds to trade. His voice cracked slightly. And they responded by declaring our ancestral lands crown property. They built fences, brought cattle, destroyed the migration routes of the animals we depend on. Victoria felt a crushing weight in her chest. I am sorry, she murmured. I am sorry for what my people have done to yours. Gudo looked at her with surprise. In all his years, no British person had offered an apology. None had acknowledged the pain they had caused. You are not to blame for the sins of your parents, he said finally. But you carry their blood, just as I carry the blood of chiefs fallen to British bullets. That night, while the fire crackled between them, an unspoken truth hung in the air. They were beginning to care for each other in ways that neither dared to admit. The hatred that Gudo had nurtured for years was beginning to crack, not through easy forgiveness, but through recognition of shared humanity. And Victoria, who had spent her life surrounded by arrogant colonials who considered Africans less than human, was discovering honor, wisdom, and dignity in a man who was supposedly her enemy. 2 weeks had passed since Gudo saved Victoria in the wilderness, and her ankle had healed enough that she could walk without pain. During that time, something deep had blossomed between them, something that neither knew how to name or if they should even try. Gudo had taught Victoria the secrets of the bush, which plants were edible, how to read the signs of weather in animal behavior, how to move silently through the acacia trees. Victoria, in turn, shared with him stories of the British world he only knew from outside, the music, the literature, the traditions that had nothing to do with conquest and violence. They discovered that they laughed at the same things, that both loved mornings when the sun painted the savannah gold, that both had lost their mothers young and carried that pain like a wound that never completely closed. Gudo carved a small figure of a honey badger in olive wood and gave it to Victoria. She taught him an English lullaby her mother used to sing, and though Gudo did not understand all the words, the melody moved him to tears. One afternoon, while they rested by the waterhole near the cave, Victoria dared to ask the question that had been circling her mind for days. Gudo, what do we do now? I cannot return to the city. Probably my father is searching for me. And if he finds me... I will not let them force you into that marriage, interrupted Gudo fiercely. If you want, you can stay here. My people would accept you if I ask it. Victoria looked at him with eyes full of emotion. Why would you do that for me? I am British, your enemy by birth. Gudo took her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Because you have taught me something I had forgotten. That vengeance does not heal wounds, it only deepens them. Because when I look at you, I do not see a British woman. I see Victoria, a brave woman who chose freedom over gold, who listens with respect to stories of a world she was taught to despise, who laughs with sincerity and cries with honesty. Tears rolled down Victoria's cheeks. I also feel something for you that I should not feel. Something that goes against everything I was taught. She moved slowly closer to him. But my heart does not understand wars or conquests. It only knows that with you, I feel more alive than I have ever felt. Gudo drew her toward him, and their lips met in a kiss that sealed the bridge between two worlds that had been at war for a generation. It was a kiss that tasted of tears and hope, of painful past and uncertain future, of love that defied all the rules of their time. But fate has a cruel way of interrupting moments of perfect happiness. The sound of horses' hooves and voices shouting military orders in English filled the air. Gudo and Victoria separated abruptly, reality crashing against them like a cold wave. "Search everywhere!" shouted a voice that made Victoria's blood freeze. It was her father's voice, Colonel Edmund Ashford. "My daughter is somewhere in these lands. We will not rest until we find her." Gudo took Victoria's hand and they ran toward the cave. His warrior mind was already evaluating options. They could flee deeper into the wilderness, but Victoria was not prepared for the harshness of that journey. They could hide in the cave, but if the soldiers found it, she would be discovered. While they hastily packed provisions, Victoria noticed something she had never seen before. A wooden chest carved in a corner of the cave. In his haste, Gudo had left it open, and inside, Victoria saw documents, maps, and something that made her stop dead. It was a small necklace made of lion's teeth, showing symbols of Hadza chieftainship. The significance was unmistakable, and beside the necklace was a ceremonial staff carved with the history of his lineage, naming Gudo as the direct descendant of the great chief Mambali. You are a prince," murmured Victoria, turning toward him with eyes full of awe. "Not just a leader. You are royalty." Gudo closed his eyes, knowing this moment would arrive eventually. "I am the last of the direct line of Chief Mambali. My father was the greatest hunter and leader our people had known." He paused, his next revelation weighing on his tongue like molten lead. "Your father, Colonel Edmund Ashford, was the one who gave the order to execute my father during the massacre at the sacred baobab grove." The silence that followed was so profound that both could hear their own hearts breaking. Victoria stepped back, her face paling until it became almost transparent. "No, it cannot be." "I saw my father fall," continued Gudo, his voice breaking despite his attempts to maintain composure. "I was 14 years old. I was hiding in the tall grass. Your father shouted the order and his soldiers shot him. The last thing I heard from my father was my name, calling me, trying to make sure I would survive." Victoria collapsed to her knees, tears running down her face like rivers. Everything fit now. Her father's nightmares, his obsession with protecting her from natives, his refusal to speak of that day at the baobab grove. She had grown up under the roof of the man who had murdered Gudo's father. "That is why you saved me," sobbed Victoria, "not out of compassion. You saved me to take revenge, to make me suffer as you suffered." "No!" roared Gudo, kneeling beside her. "At first I did not know who you were. You were just a British woman dying. But even when I suspected, even when I saw the Ashford family crest on your mother's locket." He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Even then I could not hate you. I tried to. God knows I tried. But every day you spent here, every smile, every conversation, taught me that you are not responsible for your father's sins, just as I am not responsible for the decisions of mine." The voices of the soldiers were getting closer and closer. Gudo knew they had minutes, maybe seconds before being discovered. "Victoria, look at me," he said urgently. "I love you. Not as a tool of revenge, not despite who you are, but because of who you are. You can choose. I can let you go right now. You will walk toward those soldiers and return to your life. Or you can trust me one more time and flee with me into the unknown. Victoria looked at him through her tears. Everything she had been taught screamed at her to run toward her father, to get away from this man whose family had been destroyed by hers. But her heart, that stubborn organ that understands neither logic nor history, told her something completely different. I go with you, she whispered. I do not know if I'm making the right decision. I do not know if we can overcome our pasts, but I know that I do not want to be anywhere else but by your side. Gudo kissed her with desperation and gratitude mixed. Then he took her hand and they left through the back entrance of the cave, a secret exit that led to ancient tunnels created by his ancestors. As they descended into darkness, leaving behind the sound of soldiers searching their refuge, both knew they had just crossed a point of no return. They had chosen to love each other above inherited hatred, but the world would not easily forgive that choice. The true test of their love was just beginning. The underground tunnels led them through kilometers of darkness illuminated only by the torch Gudo had had the foresight to take. Victoria stumbled occasionally, but he was always there to hold her. Neither spoke, each lost in their own turbulent thoughts about the revelation that had detonated between them like a grenade. They emerged at dawn in a clearing hidden by ancient baobab trees, where Gudo had an emergency camp prepared. It was a place his people used as a meeting point in times of danger, with stored provisions and hidden weapons. Victoria sat on a rock, exhausted physically and emotionally. Gudo lit a fire and prepared tea from wild herbs in silence. The weight of everything unspoken hung between them like dense fog. Tell me everything, Victoria said finally, her voice hoarse. I need to know everything about that day, about my father, about what really happened. Gudo sat facing her, the fire crackling between them. It was during the dry season. Hundreds of Hadza had gathered at the sacred baobab grove for an important ceremony. They were unarmed, celebrating, honoring our ancestors. His hands trembled as he remembered. The British soldiers surrounded the grove. Your father, Edmund Ashford, led one of the units. The governor had given the order, but it was your father who executed it with the most brutality. Victoria felt nauseous, but did not look away. She needed to hear this. They massacred everyone, continued Gudo, silent tears rolling down his cheeks. Men, women, elders, children. The blood soaked into the sacred earth. The screams. The screams have never left my ears. My father saw me hidden and used his last breath to shout to one of his warriors to get me out of there. I survived because he chose to ensure my escape instead of defending himself. I cannot apologize for him, sobbed Victoria. There are not enough words in any language to compensate for that horror, but you need to know. She paused, searching for words. That I did not know. For years I heard my father speak of honor and glory, but he never told me the details of what he did that day. Now I understand why his hands trembled when he raised his wine glass, why he woke screaming in the middle of the night. Gudo looked at her with an intensity that pierced through her. Do you know why I did not kill you when I discovered who you were? Because I saw in your eyes the same innocence that was in mine before that day. You did not choose your father, just as I did not choose to be born a prince. We are victims of a destiny that others wrote with blood. Victoria stood and walked toward him, kneeling before the warrior who had lost everything. My father destroyed your world, and I have fallen in love with the man who has the most right to hate me on all the earth. Gudo took her hands, intertwining their fingers. And I have fallen in love with the woman who taught me that the cycle of hatred only ends when someone is brave enough to choose love. He kissed her softly, a kiss that tasted of forgiveness and possibility. But you need to understand something, Victoria. If you stay with me, you can never return. You will be considered a traitor by your people. And my people. Not all will forgive me for loving the daughter of the man who killed our chief. I already made my decision, responded Victoria with a firmness that surprised them both. When I escaped from the residence, I stopped being the daughter of Colonel Ashford. Now I am just Victoria, and I choose to be with you. During the following weeks, they lived as fugitives in the wilderness. Gudo taught Victoria the survival skills she would need: how to hunt with a bow, how to track animals, how to read the stars for orientation. She learned words in Hadza, and he perfected his English. At night, huddled under the stars, they shared stories of their childhoods, so different but equally marked by loss. Victoria told him about her mother, a gentle woman who had died when she was 12, leaving her at the mercy of a father obsessed with power. Gudo spoke to her of his training as a prince, the impossible expectations, the weight of carrying the future of a displaced people on his shoulders. "Sometimes I wonder," said Victoria one night while they watched fireflies dance in the darkness, "if our fathers could see us now, what would they say?" Gudo reflected on the question. "My father taught me that a true leader serves his people, not his vengeance. I think he would understand." He paused. "Your father, however." "My father would see this as the ultimate betrayal," completed Victoria sadly. "But he betrayed me first when he decided that my life belonged to him." It was during their 4th week in the wilderness when everything changed. Gudo had gone to hunt, leaving Victoria gathering medicinal herbs near the camp. She was so concentrated on her task that she did not hear the footsteps approaching until it was too late. "So it is true," said a voice in Hadza behind her. Victoria turned abruptly and found 5 Hadza warriors emerging from the bush, their faces painted with ceremonial marks. The one who had spoken was a middle-aged man with deep scars and eyes full of barely contained hatred. "The prince has taken a British woman as a lover." Victoria stepped back, her hand moving instinctively toward the knife Gudo had taught her to carry. "I am not his prisoner, if that is what you think," she said in halting Hadza. "I am here by my own choice." "She speaks our language," observed another warrior with surprise. "The prince has been teaching her our secrets." The leader, whose name was Kamwen, approached with measured steps. "I am the captain who survived the massacre at the baobab grove. I served Chief Mambali until the day he died under British bullets." His eyes narrowed. "And you carry the same shape of face, the same eyes. You are Ashford's daughter." Victoria raised her chin, refusing to show fear, though her heart beat like a war drum. "I am Ashford's daughter by blood, but not by choice or action. I repudiate everything my father did. I have left my previous life to be with Gudo." "And you think that erases the blood of our brothers?" spat Kamwen. "You think that because the prince has taken you to his bed, we will forget that your father massacred our families?" "No!" shouted Victoria, her voice breaking but remaining firm. "I do not expect you to forget. I do not expect you to forgive. But I will also not pay for my father's sins the rest of my life. If you are going to kill me for my surname, do it. But know that you will be murdering an innocent woman, becoming the same as him." The silence that followed was tense as a bowstring stretched to its maximum. The warriors exchanged glances, clearly divided between inherited hatred and the honor that demanded not spilling innocent blood. It was then that Gudo emerged from the bush, his bow tensed and pointing directly at Kamwen. "Take one step closer to her, and this arrow will pierce your heart before you can blink." "My prince," said Kamwen without lowering his weapon, "do you threaten us, your own brothers, for a British woman?" "I threaten you, my brothers, because you are about to make the same mistake that destroyed our way of life," responded Gudo, lowering his bow, but remaining between Victoria and the warriors. We are divided, fighting among ourselves instead of against our true enemies. Victoria is not my enemy. She is the woman I love. You love the daughter of the man who killed your father, roared Kamwen. Where is your honor? Where is your vengeance? My honor is in choosing the future over the past, declared Gudo with an authority that made even Kamwen step back slightly. My vengeance will be building something better than what they destroyed, and I will do it with Victoria by my side or die trying. The warriors slowly lowered their weapons, clearly not expecting such conviction from their prince. Kamwen studied Gudo for a long moment. Your father made me swear to protect you with my life. I cannot support this madness, but neither can I raise myself against you. He looked at Victoria with eyes that still glowed with distrust. But if you ever betray us, British woman, I will find you no matter where you hide. After the warriors left, Victoria collapsed in Gudo's arms, trembling from accumulated adrenaline. This is never going to work, is it? Your people will never accept me. Some never will, admitted Gudo, stroking her hair. But others will see what I see, that love is stronger than hatred, that the future matters more than the past. He moved her away enough to look into her eyes. Victoria, there is something I need to ask you. Something I have been considering for weeks. He knelt before her, taking from his pouch a necklace of ostrich eggshell beads carved with symbols of his lineage. This necklace belonged to my mother and her mother before her. In my culture, when a man offers this to a woman, he is asking her to become his life partner, his equal in everything. His eyes filled with emotion. Victoria Ashford, who rejected a surname, woman who taught me to love again, will you do me the honor of being my wife according to the traditions of my people? Tears rolled down Victoria's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. Gudo placed the necklace around her neck with trembling hands. Before the ancestral spirits and the sky that covers us, I take you as my partner. Your pain will be my pain. Your joy will be my joy. Your path will be my path. Victoria took his hands. And I take you as my partner. I renounce my past to build our future. Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people. Your fight will be my fight. They kissed under the canopy of acacia trees, sealing a union that defied centuries of hatred and war. But their moment of happiness was interrupted by a sound that froze their blood. British military bugles resonating in the valley, followed by Hadza drums responding from the hills. A battle, murmured Gudo, his face hardening. A large one. They ran toward a promontory overlooking the valley, and what they saw left them breathless. Hundreds of British soldiers, led by Colonel Edmund Ashford, mounted on a black horse, were marching toward a defenseless Hadza settlement. Gudo's warriors were trying to organize defense, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. I have to go, said Gudo, his voice filled with urgency. My people need me. I am going with you, declared Victoria. No, it is too dangerous. Your father is down there. Precisely why I must go, interrupted Victoria with fierce determination. Maybe I am the only one who can stop this without more bloodshed. Gudo looked at her with mixed admiration and terror. If you do this, there will be no going back. Your father will know you chose my side. I already chose my side, responded Victoria, touching the eggshell necklace at her neck. Now I am going to fight for it. The valley vibrated with the tension of two forces about to collide. Victoria and Gudo descended quickly through hidden paths that only the Hadza knew, arriving at the settlement moments before the massacre would begin. The Hadza warriors had formed a defensive line with spears and bows, but everyone knew that against British rifles and discipline, their bravery alone would not be enough. The women and children of the settlement had taken refuge in the central meeting place, praying to ancestral spirits that had not been able to protect them before. Gudo positioned himself at the front of his warriors, his presence instantly elevating their morale. "Brothers," he shouted in Hadzan, his voice resonating with royal authority. "Today, we do not fight only for our lives. We fight for the right to exist with dignity on the land of our ancestors. May the spirits give us strength. Ekultu." From the other side, Colonel Edmund Ashford raised his sword. "Soldiers of the crown, these savages have kidnapped my daughter. There will be no mercy until they return her to me. Attack." It was then that Victoria did something no one expected. She walked directly into the space between both armies, placing herself in no man's land with her arms extended. The wind whipped her auburn hair and the ostrich eggshell necklace gleamed against her chest. "Stop!" she shouted in English, then repeated in Hadzane, "Akaiti." Both sides hesitated, surprised by the appearance of a British woman dressed in simple leather clothes, standing with the courage of a warrior between two armies. "Victoria!" roared Colonel Ashford, his face reddening with fury and relief mixed. "Get away from those savages immediately." "No, father," responded Victoria with a voice that did not tremble, despite the terror she felt. "They have not kidnapped me. I am here by my own will." The silence that followed was absolute. 500 men held their breath while father and daughter faced each other across the battlefield. Edmund Ashford dismounted slowly, walking toward his daughter with measured steps. Gudo tensed, ready to intervene, but Victoria signaled him to stay in place. "You have lost your reason," said Edmund when he was close enough that only she could hear, "living like a savage with these animals." "These animals," replied Victoria with controlled coldness, "treated me with more respect and dignity than I ever received in your residence. They saved my life when I would have preferred to die rather than marry the monster you chose for me." Edmund's face contorted with something resembling pain. "I was protecting you, securing your future." "You were selling me like cattle," spat Victoria, "as you did with the Hadza lands, as you did with the lives of innocents." She took a step closer, her voice lowering but intensifying. "I know what you did at the sacred baobab grove, father. I know about the massacre. I know that you ordered the death of unarmed men, women, children." Edmund paled. It was an order. We were at war." "It was not war," interrupted Victoria. "It was murder. And among all those you killed that day, you murdered the father of the man I love." The words fell like bombs. The British soldiers murmured among themselves, some with expressions of shock. The Hadza warriors watched with intensity, understanding enough English to grasp the meaning. "The man you love," repeated Edmund slowly, his gaze moving toward Gudo, who remained motionless as an ebony statue. Recognition came gradually to his eyes. "The prince. The son of..." His voice broke. "Good God, Victoria! Do you know what you have done?" "I have chosen love over hatred," responded Victoria with tears rolling down her cheeks. "I have chosen to build bridges instead of burning civilizations. I have chosen to be better than what we were, you and I." Edmund stepped back as if he had been struck. For the first time in his life, Victoria saw her father not as the imposing colonel, but as an old man shattered by the weight of his own actions. "Better than me," he murmured. "I suppose anything would be better than me." Victoria had never heard her father speak this way. He had always been hard, authoritarian, sure of every decision. But now, facing his daughter and the son of the man he had murdered, something in him seemed to break. "That night at the grove," said Edmund with a hoarse voice, addressing Gudo directly in English, "I received orders from the governor, but I executed them with more enthusiasm than necessary. For 10 years, the faces of those people haunt me in dreams, especially one face, a man with chieftain's markings who shouted his son's name before falling." Gudo stepped forward, every muscle in his body tense. "That man was my father. I was 14 years old when I saw him die. Edmund closed his eyes. There was a boy. I remember seeing him hidden. One of my men was going to... But I stopped him. I said, enough blood for today. We let the boy escape. He opened his eyes, looking directly at Gudo. It was you. The world seemed to stop. Gudo had spent 10 years hating the man who killed his father, swearing vengeance. But now he discovered that this same man had saved him from being murdered that day. Why? Asked Gudo with a broken voice. If you were going to kill my father, why not complete the job? Because I saw the terror in your eyes, responded Edmund, tears running down his weathered face, and for a moment I saw my own daughter at that age. I could not murder a child looking at me like that. He turned toward Victoria. I have committed atrocities in the name of the king and God. I have destroyed a way of life and lied to myself, calling it sacred conquest. But that day, allowing that boy to live was the only decent thing I did in the entire damned campaign. Victoria took her father's hand, feeling how it trembled. Then she extended her other hand toward Gudo. Hatred has defined us for too long, but we can choose something different. Here, now, we can break the cycle. Gudo looked at Victoria's extended hand, then at the man who had destroyed his world, but also saved him. Every fiber of his being screamed vengeance, but another voice, softer but stronger, whispered forgiveness. Slowly, as if moving mountains, Gudo took Victoria's hand, and through her, he connected with the man who had been his enemy for his entire adult life. My father taught me, said Gudo with a trembling voice, that the true leader chooses the path that benefits his people, not the one that satisfies his thirst for revenge. He looked at Victoria, his love shining in his eyes despite the tears. And this woman has taught me that love can heal wounds that the sword would only deepen. He turned toward Edmund. I cannot forgive the unforgivable. I cannot forget the unforgettable, but I can choose not to allow your past to destroy my future. He breathed deeply. For Victoria, for the children who are hiding in that settlement, terrified of dying, for all the mothers who have mourned children on both sides of this war, I choose peace. A murmur rose from both armies. Some Hadza warriors protested, feeling their prince was betraying them. Some British soldiers muttered that this was weakness, but many more, tired of years of violence, saw in this moment a hope they had believed impossible. Edmund fell to his knees before Gudo, a gesture unthinkable for a proud British colonel. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I offer you this. My lands, my wealth, everything I took from your people will be returned. And before God I testify that I will never again raise my sword against your people. Gudo helped Edmund to his feet. Your lands mean nothing without your word. Swear to me that this valley, these hunting grounds, will be free territory where my people can live according to our traditions without fear. I swear it, responded Edmund without hesitation. And more still. I will use my influence in the colonial administration to establish treaties that protect your people. He looked at his daughter. It will be my penance. My only way to redeem myself before the gods I have offended, and the daughter I almost lost to my ambition. Victoria embraced her father for the first time in years, feeling how the rigid and cold man finally allowed himself to show emotion. Thank you, father, she whispered, for letting me choose my own path. I was always afraid of losing you, admitted Edmund, and in that fear I almost lost you anyway. He moved her away to look at her. This man, this prince, does he make you happy? Victoria looked at Gudo, who waited with patience and respect. Happier than I ever believed possible. Edmund extended his hand toward Gudo. Then you have my blessing, and my eternal gratitude for seeing worth in my daughter, where I only saw a burden. Gudo took the hand, sealing a peace that 10 years of war had not managed to destroy. The British soldiers and Hadza warriors gradually lowered their weapons, some with tears in their eyes, others with skepticism, but all feeling that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The afternoon sun painted the valley with golden tones as a prosperous community bustled with life. The houses combined Hadza traditional structures with British practical innovations, creating a unique style that symbolized the fusion of two worlds. Children ran through the clearings speaking a fluid mixture of Hadzane and English, knowing no barriers that had divided their parents. Victoria, now 29 years old, walked through the central gathering place with her daughter of 3 years, Kanati, riding on her shoulders. The girl had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark complexion. Her laughter filled the air as she pointed to the colorful beads and carved wooden toys that traders displayed. "Mama, look! Birds!" shouted Kanati in Hadzan, pointing to woven baskets with colorful feathers. "Yes, my love. They are beautiful," responded Victoria in the same language, now fluent after years of practice. Gudo appeared through the crowd with their 5-year-old son, Mambali, by the hand. The boy was the exact image of his father, with the same intensity in his young eyes. "Your wife has been seeking more problems," joked Gudo, referring to a minor dispute between traders that he had been mediating. "My husband is always solving problems," responded Victoria with a smile, kissing him softly. That is why they chose him as chief of this community. It was true. The mixed population of Hadza and progressive British settlers had chosen Gudo as their leader, recognizing his wisdom and his unique ability to understand both cultures. With Victoria by his side as advisor and translator, they had established a system of governance that honored Hadza traditions, while incorporating the advantages of British organization. In the central square, where once a sacred meeting place had stood before being destroyed, now there was a hybrid structure, part traditional Hadza gathering circle, part British community hall, where both traditions were honored without either dominating the other. Father Thomas, a young priest who believed in peaceful coexistence, worked alongside Ndagu, the Hadza spiritual elder, organizing ceremonies that celebrated the best of both worlds. "Grandfather!" shouted Kanadi upon seeing Edmund Ashford walking toward them. The elderly colonel, now 68 years old with completely white hair, had become a constant presence in the community. He had fulfilled his promise, using his influence to establish treaties that protected indigenous rights throughout the region. "My little flower," said Edmund in surprisingly good Hadzani, lifting his granddaughter in his arms. "Have you been good to your mother today?" "Always good, grandfather," responded Kanati with the comic seriousness of small children. Gudo watched the scene with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Seeing the man he had hated for so long playing with his daughter, teaching her English songs while she taught him Hadzane words, was a miracle he had never believed possible. Victoria noticed her husband's expression and took his hand. "What are you thinking about?" "About how destiny has strange ways of healing what seems irreparable," responded Gudo. "Your father destroyed my world, but he brought you to me. And you gave me a new world." That night, after putting the children to bed, Victoria and Gudo sat on the veranda of their house watching the stars. The ostrich eggshell necklace he had given her 5 years ago still hung from her neck, now accompanied by a locket that had belonged to Victoria's mother. "Do you ever regret it?" asked Gudo, as he occasionally did. "Everything you left behind, the luxuries of the residence, the life you could have had." Victoria nestled against him. "Every day I'm grateful for the storm that lost me in the wilderness. Every day I'm grateful that you chose to save me instead of letting me die, because it led me to you, to this life, to these children who are living bridges between worlds that supposedly should never have touched. Our children will grow up without knowing the hatred that defined us," observed Gudo with deep satisfaction. "They will speak both languages as natives. They will honor both cultures as their own. They will be living proof that love can conquer what the sword never could. In the distance, they could see the lights of the community hall, where an evening ceremony was being held. Hadza voices singing ancient songs mixed harmoniously with British hymns, creating a unique symphony of shared faith. Sometimes I think about that young woman who fled from the residence without plan or hope, murmured Victoria, so frightened, so lost. If I could speak to her, I would tell her that the most terrifying path leads to the most beautiful destinies. Gudo kissed her forehead. And if I could speak to the bitter warrior who found that young woman, I would tell him that the vengeance he sought his entire life was worth less than a single day of true love. The children slept peacefully in their rooms, dreaming innocent dreams where skin color did not matter and surnames did not determine destiny. Edmond had returned to his nearby estate, where he now employed indigenous workers with fair wages and genuine respect. The Hadza warriors who once distrusted Victoria now called her Mother Bridge and brought their own children to learn English from her. The valley that had seen so much death now flourished with new life. Hadza and British traders worked side by side. Mixed marriages were no longer scandal, but celebration. Children grew up learning complete history from both sides, not just the victor's version. "Do you know what my favorite part of our story is?" asked Victoria, as the stars shone above them like eternal witnesses. "What?" "That it does not have an ending. Every day we write a new chapter. Every child born here adds a new page. Our story is not of conquerors and conquered, but of two people who chose to love each other enough to change the world." Gudo embraced her closer. "Then let us continue writing it, my love, until we are old and grey, telling our grandchildren about the storm that united us, the hatred we overcame, and the love that transformed enemies into family." The moon rose slowly over the sacred hills, illuminating a valley where the Hadza way of life had been threatened, but where something new and beautiful had been born from its resilience. It was not the old Hadza world nor British colony, but something completely unique. A place where the past was honored without defining the future, where wounds were acknowledged without perpetuating the cycle of pain. And at the center of it all, two people who should never have loved, whom every history book would say were impossible, demonstrated every day that true love knows no borders, that forgiveness can be more powerful than vengeance, and that sometimes the most beautiful endings are born from the most painful beginnings. The story of Victoria and Gudo would become legend, told from generation to generation, as proof that even in the darkest times, when hatred seems invincible and divisions insurmountable, two brave hearts can choose a different path and change the destiny of all who come after.